Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast, where we share the successes and challenges of raising pigs on pasture. We talk to producers all over the country, from small homesteads to large commercial pasture operations. Whether you're new to pastured pigs or have been raising hogs for decades, we hope you hear new ideas and new perspectives on pasturing hogs. Here's your host, Troy McClung.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast. I'm your host, Troy McClung. Sorry we missed a week last week, as I'm sure all of you are experiencing the same thing. It's been a little crazy. It's been a little hectic. A lot of new ground we're plowing right now with this pandemic. So just got covered up with a whole bunch of things last week and was unable to get my interview out, get a podcast episode out. But back on track here. We are sheltering in place at our farm, and our technology pushes against us a little bit here. So I'm not quite sure how many more interviews I'm going to be able to do going forward until this is lifted. There's some things I'm trying to do. I kind of feel like I'm trying to MacGyver things here at the farm to be able to record interviews coming in. Our phone is not the greatest. I don't have cell service. There's all kinds of limitations when it comes to that. So we'll try to do podcast episodes as we can get them out. I do have some already pre-recorded, so we will be releasing those. But I pray everyone's doing okay, that you're not letting this get to you too badly, and that keep the anxiety low. Just keep on keeping on. And I know many of you that work all farm jobs are having some serious issues with not being able to work, the loss of income, and obviously that trickles over into your farm. So I hope that's something that's going to be remedied soon for you. Probably do a podcast episode coming up. In fact, if I can get my details together, maybe next week's, where we talk about the effects of COVID on pastured pig operations around the country. Some of you guys have chimed in on some of the Facebook groups, sharing your experiences, and just been watching that to see what's going on. So we may have some discussion on that, and then maybe a solo podcast if things can go well. I'm going to jump right into our interview, so we'll catch you on the backside. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Pastured Pig Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Troy McClung. Today, we'll be interviewing into the great state of Michigan. I have with me from Provision Family Farms, Luke Ising. Welcome, Luke.
Hi there.
Well, I was glad you could join me this evening and have an opportunity to discuss, I guess, the weather in Michigan. Have you seen spring yet, or is it still late to show up?
No, we're seeing spring here. We've had pretty much a melt-off. It never really froze under the snow this year anyway.
Isn't that crazy?
Not properly. Yeah. So it's, however, has been wet. Water tables are high, rivers are high, everything's wet.
Yeah.
We're pretty glad we live on sand in our particular place. So.
Yeah, that's good. You don't have to mess with red clay mud like we do. That's very good. All right. Well, tell us a little bit about Provision Family Farm. What do you have going on there?
All right. Well, we have about 80 acres. About half of that's woods. There's some wetlands and water features on it. And I got about 30 acres of grass pasture here at the home farm. And we do pigs, cattle, some chickens and sheep as well. And we really pasture our pigs. They're through the growing season, they're on pasture, and they're getting almost all their diet from pasture. Yeah. So
excellent. Okay. So how many pigs are you usually running throughout the course of the year?
I like to say I butcher about 60 pigs a year or something for my various markets, and I don't really sell large animals very often, but I sell probably another 60 or 70 piglets as well a year.
Yeah. Okay. Well, how long have you been raising animals on pasture?
About 6 years. I was working. I was working in the trades, and I had my good old college degree that I wasn't making any money on anyway, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and I heard a lecture by Joel Salatin, and it just kind of turned my life around. So,
yeah, tell me a little bit more about that. That's always interesting. I'd love to hear how people enter into this area.
Right. Yeah. So I grew up in farming country in Iowa and in South Dakota, where farms are very, very large, and the people in our circles and in our church had enormous farms, $500,000 tractors, and so forth. And it didn't look like anything a person could afford to get into. And it didn't look very interesting to me either, because I don't want to drive in circles all day. Yeah. And so I never really considered it as a career option. And anyway, I was driving along one day, delivering some parts for HVAC, and I hear this lecture from Joel Salatin. He talks about direct market farming and being able to be home, with your family and work from home. And I was like, wow, I had that epiphany. I said, this is what I want to do with my life. So I went home and I ordered his book. You Can Farm was a good choice. I read it, through in a sitting, then ordered probably a couple hundred more books in the next year on all kinds of topics. And I took a year. My parents had 4 acres, and I tried it out there. And we just started raising animals. And they already had a few at that point, but we never thought it could be a moneymaker until I learned about really direct market farming. So we tried it out for a year, my wife and I, and then we moved over to here where land is pretty affordable, and we're still within an hour of Grand Rapids, which is our marketing base. And we bought 80 acres, my parents and I together.
All right. Wow. That's excellent. So the partnership with your parents and you all allowed you to have that entry point into this property, it sounds like.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way I would have been able to get anything like this. So
now, are you doing that full time? Is that your exclusive income? Do you have is there alternate income with your wife, or how does that work out?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have my wife is home with the kids, mm-hmm. of which we have our 5th on the way right now.
Oh, wow, excellent.
And we, my father's working, and that helps really pay the mortgage, and then lets me farm with a lot less to worry about. So I'm supported in that way. And I farm full time, except in the winter. I pick up a lot of work, sometimes the whole winter, but often just parts of it. And I still take odd jobs here and there in the summer as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it always helps to have that extra fallback when you need it.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, that's interesting. That's always a question. That seems to be the biggest hurdle that we hear about is the entry point in land and how to acquire land, or when it comes to that economic barrier of buying. How about leasing? How about partnerships? Those type of things. That sounds like a good acquisition there of that 80 acres.
Yeah, we're glad, and it's. I think it's the biggest challenge for everyone is how are we going to pay the bills doing this? It's something some people want to talk about, but a lot of people don't want to talk about. I don't think a lot of people in this business, are really able to make mortgage payments and make a good living on it yet. So, but we're at where we're at, and we're loving it. And every year we get, I think, more profitable and smarter. So.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. It is a little off the rabbit trail that I tend to go down. So in your experience now, voice is cracking. You did this, you're 6 years in, so you've been a full-time farmer for the last 6 years?
For summers at least, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So looking at that and saying, okay, when I got into this, there's this, maybe romantic's not the right word, but this romantic element of being a full-time farmer. Looking at that now that it's become the job, has drudgery crept in? Is there anything that's taken away from that initial romance period of being a full-time farmer?
We have romance in our lives for a reason. It would be pretty boring without it, whether it's in work or in relationships. So I have no problem using the word romance to describe what happens when we get started.
Yeah.
And certainly I think as a marriage, progresses to 6 years, you tend to have a comfortable relationship that is a little less exciting and can't sleep at night, but has a lot of meaning to it. So I don't think farming has really lost a whole lot for me. It's gained a lot of depth in at least in production. If there's a part of farming that I'm getting tired of, it seems like every year we have to reinvent our marketing. It's hard to find good markets, and it's hard to keep them.
Interesting. All right. Well, let's. I want to stick a pin in that because I want to come back to that. So I'm actually going to put that in my notes here. But I want to learn a little bit more about your farm. You talked about being polyculture, so you got multiple protein sources there. If you don't mind, hit that list again. What are you guys raising and selling?
Right. So pigs is the biggest, but cattle is right behind it. And then there's a fair bit of chicken and a little bit of sheep in there, and fall turkeys, Thanksgiving turkeys. Okay. And I'll tell you how we do it. We're pretty pretty into rotational grazing. I do 1-day moves through the growing season for the most part. Sometimes it can creep up to 2 or 3 days when things get dormant in the fall and so forth. Or if I have some reason to have a few animals sort of by themselves, I have less labor and just not moving as often. But as a whole, we're really committed to moving the animals. And speaking of which, I would just encourage anyone who's listening to think about to take a look at a free episode or issue of Stockman Grass Farmer.
Yeah.
Maybe only about a quarter of the articles or less really deal with pastured pigs, but ultimately we're not really in the pig business. We're in the grass business.
Yeah.
We're in the pasture business.
Yeah.
And so just learning how to manage that is a big deal. So we really push hard to have as few different herds as possible. And so we run pigs together with cattle and sheep. And sometimes layers can be running in that mix as well. And we've never had any issues with sort of them not getting along or anything. So the polyculture works really nicely there, and it just makes moving a lot easier. I can use maybe 2 wires, 2 electric wires, roll them out, and move the whole herd at once.
Yeah.
And water them all at once.
So when you got started with that, did you know you wanted to be polyculture immediately, and did you start with a little bit of each, or did you start with a certain species and move up?
Yeah, so we started with 5 pigs, and we threw them in the woods because I figured pigs belonged in the woods.
There you go. Yeah.
And we had our cattle and sheep on pasture together, which has always been nice for us. It's really keeping other animals with the sheep has prevented us from needing to get any kind of guardian animals because most of the predators around here don't want to tangle with cattle and certainly not with pigs.
Yeah, they don't. All right.
But no, I didn't know any better. I put the pigs in the woods, and since then I've gotten an idea of how that can be pretty destructive to the woods if you leave pigs in there full time and you don't rotate them very much, which is easy to do in the woods because it's hard to run temporary fences and so forth.
Right, yeah.
So we still use the woods in our rotation, especially in the hot parts of the summer, but the bulk of their diet comes from grass pasture.
All right, excellent. What do you gravitate toward a specific breed with your pigs, or have you found success in certain areas there?
Yeah, so we started out really looking into the large black and getting some animals from that, and then since then we've mixed in probably 7 or 8 different heritage breeds. We have a really unusual sort of herd and breeding management system, and I don't think it's for everyone, but I am going to share it with you. We run 1 herd of pigs through the whole growing season. And we have the boar, we have the sows, we have the young ones. And if we have an animal that farrows, it tends to make a nest and go off and farrow. And then we just drop it out of the rotation and we leave it in that field, and I'll run some feed to it directly and just kind of check on it, and it'll be okay. Or sometimes we'll pull it off and kind of herd it off to a barn where we just let it farrow, with some other mothers there. But we're more or less running 1 herd through the whole year. And to make it even more complicated, we don't actually cut our boars. We're one of them. And so I don't have direct control over exactly who's breeding or when they're breeding.
Interesting. So, okay, wow, there's a lot to unpack there. So
it's weird.
Yeah, so as you're moving your herd along, you've got, like I said, your boars intermixed. You've got your sows, any gilts that are new into that area, I guess, and then as
feeders and so forth.
Yeah, so as the litters are at. But so when one farrows, you're kind of either rotating it out into a shelter, or you're just leaving it behind in that pasture so it can nurse and kind of stay on its own.
Yeah, we'll drag a truck topper over there maybe to make a little house for it sometimes, and run some feed to it. And then when the piglets are really old enough that they're starting to go everywhere, we'll try to slip it back in the rotation.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, with your boars remaining intact and having them in general population there, how does that run into as far as too many farrowings, and how do you deal with your coldest season there?
Right. So they farrow as often as they're able, and we just sort of we really kind of let breeding work in our favor. Mm-hmm. If they farrow too young and they farrow 3 or 4 piglets, then we're not going to keep that animal. So hopefully over time, and we have seen a lot of improvements, we're going to have animals whose bodies kind of wait to cycle until they're ready, and then they cycle when they're ready. And if an animal looks like it's not doing its job or isn't healthy, we just cull it, and tends go out to the butcher. And so that's kind of our management strategy, is just a lot of culling to kind of pull where we want it to. And we do introduce a new boar every once in a while to see if we can tug the gene pool a little bit one way or the other. He doesn't breed everything, but he tends to get breeding rights on the larger sows. Or we'll hold one boar back, and that I would normally send him to the butcher. He's already pretty good size, but I'll hold him back because I like the way he looks and the way he acts, and he fits my needs. And so I hold him back, let him get even bigger, and he breeds the sows. But the gilts and the smaller sows are getting bred by Lord to catch them first.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying you don't, just make sure I'm clear, you're not castrating any of your boars, even the ones that you're just growing out as feeders, correct?
Yeah. We, it's a big debate. I bet you've covered it a few times, but we don't have boar taint issues.
Yeah. We have actually
I did my homework.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So, and if you look at, I think, Sugar Mountain's website, he talks about what makes it happen. And it being on pasture more or less negates it, because they're not eating their own poop, and they're getting a lot of fiber in their system. And so we just, we sell, I don't know, $10,000-$15,000 of pork a year without any of boar pork without any complaints.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, yeah, and we've yet to have a topic specifically about taint. You mentioned Walt Jeffries. I'd love to have him on. I've asked him a couple times. I'm just trying to get the schedule nailed down, but that would be a very good discussion, because there's a lot of debate about that, whether it can be bred out and whether we're wasting our time castrating. So that's for a whole nother discussion.
Yeah. I would add to that the breed does make a difference with that. And my theory is a lot of it is pretty masculine associated, and we've bred some pretty lean pigs that I think are much more prone to it in commercial lines, because in some ways they're hyper masculine because they have to grow really fast. And I think that's a real challenge with that. But yeah, definitely breed makes a difference. Interesting.
Yeah, very good. So you answered the other question about the boar, so that takes care of that situation. When you're rotating in a new boar, do you have a specific area that you go to get some new genetics, or are you just kind of looking around, see what's available?
I'm looking at my needs to say, what do I want more of in my pigs? So like 3 years ago, I realized my pigs were coming in too lean, and it turned out to be kind of a feed problem, but it was I thought it was a genetics problem just from pasturing them. And certainly in the cattle business, we're always like hunting down the fattest animals we can get for grass-fed beef, because just getting fat into those steaks is a challenge. So I thought, I need a fattier animal. So I went to a lard pig. I got some Mangalitsa, and I put that in the herd to see what it would do. And sure enough, it added some fat, but I also lost some of the body shape I wanted. They shortened up a bunch, And so after a year, I kind of pulled them out and tried something else.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Did you see, I assume, adding the Mangalitsa, you saw some longer grow out times too, I would assume.
Yeah, that was the large black already is a slower growing pig, but the Mangalitsa was slower yet.
Yeah. All right. Well, you talked about your rotational process a little bit. I assume with moving through these pastures and keeping your polyculture together, you're using electric fence. Are you setting up for the cattle and the pigs can handle that? What's your fence construction like?
Right. So our perimeter fence is woven, and we find that keeps pigs in if you're really moving fast, and if there's lots of food to get. But it's not always 100% reliable if there's a reason for them to not be happy. And so sometimes we'll go around and we'll put temporary posts in and put a hot wire at 8 inches off the ground as well, right as we're about to use a paddock. So that's kind of situational. Depends on how the pigs have been acting, because it is a lot of extra work.
Yeah.
We tried putting permanent hot wire inside our woven fence, and it's just too much maintenance. Not only does the grass grow over it, but the pigs may mound dirt against it, and who knows what. And we just couldn't keep our fence system hot enough with ground, with wires right in front of that woven, especially if a stick pushes up against it and it hits the woven, it's just grounded out right away.
Yeah.
Not like high tensile.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll put a hot wire on the inside of the woven quite often, and then we'll use usually 2 strands of wire to keep the whole herd from moving to the next spot. And the piglets, they'll be wherever they want to be.
Right. Yeah.
And that doesn't really bother me. So.
All right. Excellent. So that as far as infrastructure for your pastures, when it comes to electricity and your water, how are you handling there? Are you plumbed? Do you have rain catchment? How are you carrying water? What's
right? Yeah, so the electricity is I do run a hot wire along the top of my woven fence on the perimeter. And I have some interior woven fences, and if I could go back, I wouldn't have put those in. I would have just put a lot less paddocks in, because a lot of my paddocks are about 3 or 4 acres, and I wish they were bigger, and I just use electric wires more.
Yeah.
But anyway, I run a hot wire along the top, and that gives me access to power basically anywhere. I got these, my fencer, I'll put a plug in for that. If you go to Ken Cove and get a fencer, you can get the Ken Cove brand fencer with a remote control that turns the fence off. That is a toy. It was a $106 remote, and it is worth it.
Yeah, exactly. Because
So,
you're always as furthest away from the plug as you can be, and realize I got to turn this on or turn it off to do some testing.
or you're just going to get bit, Yeah.
Right.
Because you got to move something, or it got buried or pushed over or whatever. That's a nice tool.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's our electric situations, just having hot wire on the top so we can kind of feed that. And the wind out rolls we use come with a sort of a second all plastic handle, and it just works really sharp. We got them also from Ken Cove, the 3-to-1 geared reels, and you can hook you have one handle that has metal running through it that you can hook onto the hot wire on top, and then you have an all plastic handle you can hook onto the woven fence at any height, and then you pull it sideways from there, so you can kind of set your height anywhere and still pull your heat off the top of the fence.
Excellent.
And then the water, we run 1-inch poly irrigation, the cheap stuff, yellow stripe, and then along a number of our interior fence lines. And then we just cut in these taps with a brass spigot on them every 100 feet or so, maybe every third fence post or however we measure it. And we run them above ground, and then we just hook up a hose to that system and just pressure it. And then we have water anywhere. And if I come to a place where I need water, I don't have it, I can just cut another T, and I got a bucket full of parts. I can cut a T, and it's about $8 for a T plus a valve, plus a couple crimp rings or pipe clamps. So I can cut a T in anywhere and just add a new valve. And then we just drain it out in the winter. Then I combine that with I take a plastic food drum and just cut it off. So I got a pretty sturdy piece of plastic, and I put a float valve on that, and maybe a 25-foot piece of really nice quality hose that's very flexible, and I can hook that up, and then I'll just hook that up, and that'll water 20 cattle in just 15 gallons, as long as it's got a float valve, and it's always full. So
yeah, excellent.
If that gets knocked over, screwed up somehow, you'll be there for an hour trying to water them while they fight to it.
Right, yeah.
But as long as you can keep the water there, they're happy, and then the pigs will use that too. And I can just, as I move the fence, I just dump out the water and move it to the next spot.
Right. Very good.
And then I do let a little leak run sometimes from that, or I'll take a hose and put it on a little valve at the end and put it on trickle to make a little wobble for the pigs in every stop, more or less, in the summer.
Yeah. Do you find in that situation, are you coming back and having to overseed after you've moved, or are you just moving them fast enough that you're not getting that much destruction?
We really have to think of destruction. We want to avoid it in most cases, but it's also a tool. So if I'm going to destroy something, I always find the spot I want to destroy. Mm-hmm. So if I come in there with supplemental feed, and in the summer in some cases I'm just throwing it right on the ground because it's mixed up and then maybe it's a little wet. I'll find a patch of weeds or a place where the soil looks sandy, and there's nothing growing, some moss, and I'll hit that. And so I tend to put the wallows also in places that I think could use the help. And then, sometimes if I have the time, I'll come back and throw some seed on it. Often the seed I throw is something that's going to grow real fast, like buckwheat, which you can graze in like 20 or 30 days after you plant.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let's talk a little bit about feed. You had mentioned something earlier about really being raised on pasture. Your pigs really are focusing primarily on pasture. So is there supplemental feed in the peak months, or are you totally cutting that out?
Right. So we have a sort of year-round bit of feed we have to use. I think I could do away with supplemental feed, but right now we pick up spent brewing grains from a couple breweries every week, and that comes year-round, and I'm not going to waste it. So I do feed that through the whole summer, and it's a protein and fiber product. So you have to. That was the reason my pigs were getting too lean, was I was giving that straight. You have to balance it with some sugar. Yeah. So I'd put a little corn with it, I'd pick up maybe a barrel is 200 pounds of beer grain, and I'd put a bucket of 25 pounds of corn with that. And bear in mind that the beer grain is about 2/3 water, so it's only 60 pounds of grain.
Yeah.
But that was enough to sort of keep things in balance to where they wouldn't get too lean. And so we feed that through the summer, and it's probably 2,500 pounds a week around the year. But that came out, when I did the math, to about 1% of their body weight in grain. So given that a full feed is, 3 to 4 pounds, it's probably maybe 30% of their diet is coming in grain. The other 70% is coming in pasture through the growing season.
That's great. So are you seeing that? So obviously you've already kind of addressed that you've taken on the issues with being too lean. Are you seeing good finish weights when you're ready to go?
Yeah, it depends how long you grow them. Mm-hmm. But we like to see finish weights, like anyone else, 180 and up. And I think I've been mostly pretty happy with my finish weights. The boys definitely finish out pretty well.
Yeah.
The girls often litter. I tend to let them litter once, and then I butcher them, unless they really did a good job. So, but even then, they can be a little behind.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
But I get the litter, so I consider that kind of a win.
Yeah.
Being able to sort of get a litter and then still have the meat. We haven't seen a lowering in quality, in product quality, at really any age in our pigs. So
very good.
It's not consistent. So if you're trying to sell to a restaurant, you can have some issues there. You can have pork chops from an old sow that are as big as a plate.
Right. Yeah.
But the product, there's no real quality issues with older animals.
All right. Well, let's segue into your selling and your marketing and retail situation there. So it sounds to me like, do you do individual cuts? Do you do wholes and halves? Do you do wholesale to markets and stores? What's the gamut of operation there?
Here in Michigan, we are in a lot better shape than most places. I have, within an hour and a half, I think I have maybe 4 USDA packers to choose from.
Wow.
So, and none of them are closer than an hour, but that's okay. So I've been able to do that, and there's smoking available as well, USDA smoking. So basically, all of our meat is USDA processed.
Excellent.
That doesn't mean I still wouldn't be happy to use a state butcher, if the Prime Act ever came through, and use someone who's only 15 minutes away maybe, but and someone I could work with at a smaller scale. But I'm grateful for that resource. So everything is USDA. We have a 20-foot walk-in freezer on site. That's been a great asset for us. I think in our first year already, we had like 7 freezers running, and I realized this wasn't going to go. Mm-hmm. So I bought an old reefer truck, and I was able to sell the truck for almost as much without the box after I took it off.
Yeah, that's great.
So that's that's seriously something to think about, because it's a good outdoor. It's already outdoor ready, the box.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I paid a few thousand into getting it set up with electricity instead of diesel. But it's just been a great resource for us. So we've got a lot of inventory, and then we sell. We started out selling at farmers markets, which is, I think, where nearly everyone starts out. And a lot of people, I think, find out that it's not a great setup, because you have to spend a lot of time there. And sales go up and down per market and for time of year. So we don't love farmers markets. Sometimes we still go back to them for some time here or there, trying to attract new customers.
Yeah. But
we started out with the farmers markets. Then we started a home delivery program, which is still a big deal for us, or an important part of our system, where we deliver first every 2 weeks. Now it's every month. We just we have people order online at our website, and then they order specific cuts, fill up a shopping cart, click pay, use a credit card, and then we deliver it to their door, on the first Wednesday of every month.
Interesting.
And that's attracted sort of people who are doing purchase sizes of almost $100 per order, because they're feeding their family, and it's just once a month. And so that's been a good system. We hoped it would grow, but it hasn't grown a lot. So,
do you incorporate a delivery fee into that, or is that just covered? Is there a minimum?
Yeah, there's a $10 delivery fee in there, and that doesn't really cover all our time, but it definitely covers our vehicle and gas costs per stop. So if we have, say, 8 stops in a day, then you make $80, covers your gas and vehicle costs, and then you might deliver $800 worth of product in the same amount of time.
Yeah.
Which isn't bad.
Now, are you delivering into Grand Rapids? So that hour drive? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but I am there every week anyway to pick up the spent brewing grains and to deliver to the one restaurant that buys every week from me as well.
Okay.
So we have a restaurant that buys a fair bit of pork from us, at least by our standards. And moreover, they'll buy almost any cut because they turn it into pulled pork. So that's been really nice.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Is working with that restaurant? Have you discovered how are you able to meet their need? Are you providing at a certain time, a certain amount, frozen, fresh, all those type of things? How does that come into play?
Yeah, we handle really only frozen meat in terms of our red meats. That's the way the packers want to give it to us for health reasons, for the most part, and that's not a problem for any of our consumers. I wish they had a freezer on site. They would just buy a bunch, but they insist that it goes in the fridge, and so I deliver every week. It's a pizza place, and they make pulled pork pizzas, and they buy bacon and lunch meat as well for the pizzas, like a sliced ham. And so that uses up just about the whole animal except for the pork chops and the trim.
Yeah, what a great opportunity. Yeah.
That's been a good fit, and even the guy's been really nice. If I come short, he has some other places he buys from that are a little less maybe natural or good tasting, but still work. And so he just kind of covers elsewhere. And when I have more, I come back to him. And then we've worked with a bunch of different cooperatives of various kinds, and we do have a sort of a food hub we work with right now where we sell basically to some CSAs, and we like those too. They're not a lot of time commitment, some grocery stores, but it's always piecing together, and it's always kind of a moving target, I think, getting enough market for our product.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that a little bit. You had mentioned earlier that you have marketing issues where you feel that each year you're kind of resetting or having to start all over because there's a lot of turnover in your audience. Unpack that a little bit. What's going on there?
Right. So without too much of a wine fest, I guess here in farming country, there's not a lot of mystique around what we do. For nearly anyone who lives within half an hour of me says, "Oh yeah, my grandparents had a farm. I've worked in a farm. I've been around the farm." And up and down the road, you can get eggs for 99 cents a dozen from people who clearly aren't doing math, but have a flock of chicks in the backyard.
Right.
And so the price challenge is a really big deal here. There may be some people who you can get to pay what you might need to make money off of this, but there's a lot of people who are used to seeing store prices and think that farming isn't very magical or anything. And so with pork especially, the price is a real challenge. I think less so with our beef and chicken. And really, I price our pork. I don't know if you talk much about that. Some people, it's kind of like a dirty little secret, like, "Ooh, what's your price?" Well, what's your price? We price our ground pork at $7 a pound. And most of our cuts are just barely above that because we actually have a lot of trim demand.
Yeah.
And the smoked meats obviously are more because of the smoking cost.
Sure.
But, that's about where our beef price is. For a lot of customers, that's sort of hard to imagine that pork could be as expensive as beef.
Yeah.
In some ways, I think if I did the math, though, it should cost more.
Right. Yeah. Smaller animal, definitely. Yeah.
The butchering costs are so much higher.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a good point with the fallback and I guess maybe we can go down this path. I assume that again this is where the benefit of polyculture comes in. I assume as you're offering beef, you're offering pork, you're offering chicken, that there's a combo package. You're maybe doing boxes, protein boxes, those type of things. But people tend to gravitate toward that beef as the first. The first choice versus the pork.
Oh yeah, it really depends on your customer group, and our different customer segments buy things very differently. So for us, people just plain like eating breakfast sausage, and frankly, so do I. So that's really a big seller for us to our residential customers.
Very good,
and it makes it easy. But anyway, yeah, I think we tried a lot of things, different deliveries, different drop-offs, and a lot of them people are excited about. And then I think over time, as far as I can tell, we do follow-up questionnaires and dialogue with people. And the people tend to just revert to the habit of just kind of, well, I swung by Walmart and I grabbed a pack of pork chops for dinner, and so I don't need to order from you.
Yeah.
And it just kind of, it happens. There's a slide there.
That's interesting. And this is where, obviously the question when we have these discussions about the Walmart factor there, the apples to apples comparison, or the lack of that being an apples to apples comparison, that pasture raised pork compared to a Walmart product. You're looking for the customer that recognizes that difference, and maybe that's the ideal customer you want, to know that you're going to have some attrition with customers that say, hey, your $7 pork chop is the same as the 99-cent pork chop I bought at Walmart. And that's
right. Yeah. But I think it is an extra challenge with pork in that we all have a sort of a price point where we go to the store and say, well, I'm going to buy organic. Well, it's twice as much. That's too much. 50% more I would have paid, but twice as much is too much. Everyone has a price point. And with pork, it's just kind of mind-boggling to see products for sale at less than we pay for processing.
Yeah.
That's a big hurdle to ask customers to cross that. I do understand that. But yeah, people who appreciate the quality of it. A lot of our best customers come from the Weston A. Price Foundation. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
No.
But it's a nutrition group that has chapters all over the country and a number around the world. And they understand the nutritional benefits of sort of pastured and grass-fed animals, and they work hard to provide lists of those to the people who are members of their group. And so I would just encourage people to look up WAPF online, find a local chapter, and then talk to the chapter leader and say, hey, look, I'm providing this product. Can I get on your list? And they're going to ask you some really pointed questions. They do know their stuff, and about whether it's genetically modified. They do have kind of a vendetta against soy. So they may ask you if they can get something that doesn't have soy in the feed. But they tend to have really good customers that show up with checkbooks and coolers and are buying, to feed themselves, not just as a side thing.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, we'll have to look into
So that's a resource to check out. But yeah, commanding the higher price, getting consistency from customers and keeping them. I think these are challenges, and the Walmart factor is big. Perhaps there's some room for, hopefully in the next decade, some consolidation in the pork movement in terms of how we use our terms and how we respect each other, and exactly some ideas. It's kind of a wild west out there. Everyone's doing their own thing, and
right.
I certainly am doing my own thing. But if you compare that, say, with the grass-fed industry, we have a pretty good idea of what a grass-fed animal is or isn't. And correspondingly, if you go to the store and say, I want a grass-fed steak, you're going to pay a price that I think most of us farmers would be pretty happy to get for our product.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like a huge price gap between what the stores have and what we have.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'd like to see that with pork. I mean, you go to the store and you see pork and it says naturally raised pork, and that means nothing. I mean, not even nothing.
Exactly.
If they say cage-free chickens, it means a very, very tiny thing, but natural pork means nothing.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think if we could get some words and get some ideas of what they might mean by pastured, a certain amount of access per year, a certain percentage of the diet, it'd be nice to kind of nail those things down over time as a movement.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. There needs to be more solidarity throughout, and like you say, using the proper terminology. I think I saw something pop up on social media the other day, a Walmart sign talking about their natural pork, and then their little drop-down sign was barn raised. So it was really touting the fact that their pork is barn raised.
Right, and even barn is already a sort of a nostalgic word for most people.
Right,
and there's no relation to the actual living conditions of the animals.
Yeah. So going back real quick to your customer base, are you discovering, because I just heard a discussion about this just the other day, this trend of people are cooking less. So are you getting some feedback from customers that say, oh, wow, yeah, our freezer's still full from the last time we ordered. We just haven't used all the product yet. Are you running into that much?
I do see people maybe ordering less often. I would imagine a national trend like that would be hard to trace among, like 50 or 80 customers.
Yeah.
Especially because customers we have already are not really reflective of the national average. Yeah, I think we're really going to have to find a way to meet people where they're at. I don't think we can feed America through farmers markets. People aren't going to make the trip. So we're going to be looking at delivery. We're going to be looking at getting into stores. And we're going to be looking at selling to more restaurants because people are just eating a lot more at restaurants.
Yeah.
So I really like what Chipotle does. They're always looking for natural pork suppliers. And they're not a sit-down restaurant. They're a much faster-moving restaurant, and I think that's going to be the future of food. If we can get healthy food that fits with our crazy lifestyle in America, because unfortunately we can't change that either.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we need to brainstorm about how to, we'd like to imagine everyone would cook a really nice pork roast and sit down as a family and maybe say grace and Dad would be there. But those are kind of too big for us, even as a big pork movement. So we're going to have to find how to market to the fast-paced world we live in.
Yeah, exactly. I think exploring these options. I mean, we see more and more pasture operations, and you talked about Salatin. I mean, Salatin, you just here in the last year or so started doing.
He gave up.
Yeah, started shipping. Yeah, exactly. And it's just embracing the change is inevitable. So he embraced that change, and you just wonder. I was listening to another podcast today actually, and they were talking about the guy was talking about home deliveries into a major metro area, and he said it takes me 5 hours to drive around. I'm charging a delivery fee. He said if I turn around and charge that customer the exact same delivery fee, I can and charge it as shipping. He said I can ship it via FedEx, and I don't have to go downtown. And so it's interesting.
And I thought about that too, and I think that may be the future too. I'd like to see a system though. Right now the shipping system is sort of environmentally wasteful right now. I think it involves a lot of throwaway ice packs for the most part, and a lot of packaging. So maybe we'll see something like the Schwani truck, in the future, or something where there's a refrigerated option that's a third party.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. I like that. Well, interesting. All right. Well, look, let's talk about the future. What's the next 5 years look like? Hopefully for Provision Family Farms. What do you think in the next 5 years your goals would be?
Well, this is a chance for me to talk about one of my favorite little personal topics that I'm kind of excited about for the last year and a half. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you've had people talk about this yet or not, but we've been doing a lot of work with silvopasture.
Yeah. We've had a little bit of discussion. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So here in Michigan, we have a lot of woods, and it's a wet environment, and it's not California. If we don't sort of beat back the woods, it will eat us. And so we go in there, and we have to. I do a lot of work with a chainsaw, and to me, that's work I enjoy. Mm-hmm. And so I've been taking my woods and sort of taking out. I'm going to give you a little quick run through on how we create silvopasture. Would that be okay?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so we're going into the woods, and we're looking and saying, well, what are the best trees? And we're finding the best trees, and we're leaving them there. The nice sawlog and timber trees, for us, it's hardwood. Some places might be softwood, but for us, it's oaks and maples and so forth. Mm-hmm. We're leaving the best trees. We're taking out the firewood trees. We're taking out the brush. And then I sell the firewood trees. That's my sort of side income from the farm as well. But we're looking to get, 30 to 60% shade cover is considered silvopasture. I would say you want to be in that range. So you're looking to thin it out to where there's light hitting the ground. And once you get enough light on the ground, grass will start to grow into it. And then you have silvopasture. Then you have, 2 crops coming off the same area or more. And so I've got a number of my paddocks I've thinned out. I've probably got about 10 acres of silvopasture at this point. And I have to say, even without much help, it turns into grass very fast. The pigs do a nice job of going through there and sort of fluffing up those leaves and bringing up some soil to the surface, and helps germination. But we've done that. We save the oaks, especially because they drop the nuts in the fall, and that's good for the pigs. And every year in the fall, when the acorns hit, I turn the pigs out, and for 2 weeks they don't really want anything else. They don't want to eat anything else. They just want to get all the acorns.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then I try to, if possible, I try to schedule it so I get a butcher shortly after that for most of my whole animals, and keep that taste in them while I get them to market, and get rid of them before I start paying for winter feed.
Yeah. I mean, you're my goodness, you're definitely hitting an area that I enjoy as much as well. In the Appalachian forest, we have 100 acres, and I have about 5 acres that would actually be considered pasture or meadow. And same thing, go through and eliminate some of the less desirables. In fact, I have a good friend that's a forester, and he helps me plan and we look at different areas, different pasture areas as we build the silvopasture. But leaving the white oaks specifically, the red oaks, we have beech, we have hickory, we have walnut. Mm-hmm. So leaving those behind because of the protein production from that, but being able to clear out. And and one thing to add to what you're saying, it's really interesting. So right now in our area, and I assume it's the same through most of the Midwest and Eastern Seaboard, that white oak, when it comes to timber value, is on the upside right now simply because of the barrel stave market. Craft beer, breweries and distilleries all using the white oaks to make their barrels. So that's very specific type of lumber that comes out of a very specific white oak log. There's a lot of details that come from that. So that's a high-end market right now. So there's more profit potential from the yield of that. So as we go through, we look at the white oak and say, okay, here's a marketable white oak right beside a large double trunk that has no timber value to it whatsoever. But we're going to cut down the marketable one and sell it, and then leave that double trunk because, as you know, as you clear out those competing trees, that canopy is going to increase 40, 50, 60, maybe even 80% when its competitor is gone. And it has no timber value to it, but my goodness, as far as a protein production, a double trunk is going to just throw even more acorns. So,
oaks are really prolific at just branching out wide if given the sunshine, and as they do that, they become far more prolific at dropping nuts.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the yield is just phenomenal. I have the gnarliest looking red oak you could ever imagine. I mean, it looks like something from Sleepy Hollow, from an old wives' tale or something. But it's like walking on marbles in the fall because there's just so much mass that comes from that. And same with my pigs. They want to hang out under that tree for days, just vacuuming those acorns up.
Yeah, and we have some apples too, and those are also just really you can't pick them all. Those are great.
Yeah, that's great. That's one thing I don't have. I don't have any fruit production like that. That's incredible. Well, great. Well, so that's
silvopasture there, and just it's something for people to look at. And I think if you were looking at this seriously, and you did the math, you'd probably decide if you have a lot of brush, it's probably actually better to hire someone to come in with a big chopper and just take it down. I did the math and looked at it and figured that was probably the way to do it. But I don't mind. I enjoy getting out there with a chainsaw.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
I've done a lot of that myself.
Yeah.
I piled it up into big piles and I kind of just let it rot. The best resource I found on that is a book called Silvopasture, which came out of some guys from the University of Pennsylvania. They're not very fond of pigs. They don't like pigs in the woods, but they have a lot of good information in there. So if you're just looking to learn a little more about that, take a look at that.
Excellent. All right.
And then I wanted to share a little story too about using or talking about pigs and how we use them with cover crops. We do a fair bit with cover crops as well.
Okay.
So if there's an area that the pigs have rooted up too much, and rooting is a whole topic unto itself, and I'm always trying to reduce how much rooting there is. It kind of breaks my heart if they root up too much. But if there's an area that they've rooted up a lot, or if I've got a pasture that I know is just has been weak, and every year I kind of find my weakest pasture and target it, what we'll do is we'll winter the cattle there, and we'll drop a hay bale in a different spot every time we bring one out there.
Yeah.
And just let them graze it out. It's called bale grazing. So I had this piece of ground that was 2 years ago that was blow sand. I tried to grow things, I think 3 times there. I tried to plant a little cover crop, and nothing came up more than 6 inches. So I went in there, I thinned out all the brush. I got the trees to what I would call silvopasture, and then the more open areas were okay. And then I wintered the cattle there, and I got about 80% of the ground covered with junk hay and manure. And then I took cattle out, started rotating them, in April. And then the pigs, I know if you put them out in April, they're going to start rooting before they graze because the ground is just soft and irresistible.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I put the pigs in where the cattle had been, and they stayed there for another month. And sure enough, they flipped over all those bales looking for the worms underneath them, all the junk hay, and just added their own manure to the mess and had a general good time. And then by May, things had dried up a little bit, and I was able to take them out and start grazing with the cattle. And so then I took that spot, and I came in and I dished it a couple times, and then I planted a cover crop. In most places, I think in America, you could rent a no-till drill from the county, the NRCS office. And I think that's true in most places in America. And you rent it for just unbelievably cheap prices. It's like, $60 for 3 days. You can't own equipment for that.
Yeah.
And so I rent that a couple times a year usually, once in the spring and then once in the early summer, and maybe once again in late summer. But I rented that, and I planted a mix of cover crops and a whole bunch of stuff, and I let it grow the whole summer. And then in the fall, I came back and I let the animals graze through it. A lot of juicy stuff in there, so I often use that for grazing pigs especially.
Yeah.
And wouldn't you believe it, that place grew stuff that was over knee high,
Yeah,
and in 1 year.
Yeah.
So I was just really happy with how that worked out.
What a great natural way to amend soil. I mean, you look at the inputs there. That's the function stacking of permaculture. They're really coming to light with you're feeding out that hay anyway, and just using the animals' natural instincts and natural processes to do that. That's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. And then in my regular pastures as well, if a place seems a bit rooted up, I'll run a disc over it. Maybe one pasture per year in rotation, one paddock, and I'll plant. And Sudex has just been a great crop for me. Sudan grass sorghum hybrid, a lot of sugar, and you can graze it 3 or 4 times in a year. And it's just been a great product. It's sort of like the base crop, but I add other top crops too.
Yeah. Right.
So, and if you're into cover crops and you want to play around with them, the guy to learn about them from is probably Gabe Brown. Do a little research on that for people. And if you want to order some, I have to tell you, there's a cool website I found that has a calculator where you can kind of put in where you live and what you want to do with the crop and what time of year you're planting it. It's called Green Cover Seed, and they have the Smart Mix calculator. And boy, that is a fun little toy. You plug in those things, and it spits out a list of recommendations. Like like this, there's a category for legumes and a category for grasses and a category for broadleafs and warm and cold season grasses, and it says the top 10 in each category or whatever, and you can kind of say, well, I want to add this, I want this, and there's no limit. You can add 50 different species in the same mix, and then they'll bag it and sell it to you. And I thought the prices were actually quite reasonable. I had a 40 species mix, and it showed up at my door, and it was like, I don't know, $200 for 200 pounds or something.
Yeah,
I don't know, it was a pretty good deal.
Yeah, excellent. Oh, cool. Yeah, I have to check that out as well. All right. Well, Luke, as we're kind of drawing to the close here, I always want to close out with a question I ask. What is your best experience or favorite part about raising pigs on pasture?
There's just one answer to that, and it's just going out there every day and moving animals. You got to get it in your mindset if you're really a grass farmer, that your job basically is to move animals. And every day I go out and I move animals. Every day I go out and make a whole bunch of animals really happy.
Yeah.
And, every day I go out there, I pull that gate open, pull the wire down, and they're all waiting for me because they see me coming and they know what time of day it is.
Right.
And they come through that gate and they just rush through and they go, oh boy, grass, more grass. And it's exactly what they got yesterday, but they're so excited for it. And they're out there running around, and they take a bite and take a few more steps and take another bite. And I just love watching the pleasure they get out of something that simple. And so just making animals happy every day by moving them, at least through the growing season, is really the best part of farming for me.
Oh, excellent. Good answer. Very good. Well, if people want to find out more about Provision Family Farms, where can they find you?
Right. So we have a provisionfamilyfarms.com website. Then we have a Facebook page that'll show up if you search us. And if you just kind of like keeping tabs on us, the Facebook page or the Instagram page, which there'll be links to that in the at like the website and on Facebook, are sort of the way to kind of just see what we're up to and what we're talking about. And I try to post regularly to just keep people in touch with what's happening with the family and farm. And so those are good places to talk to us. And if someone is in my area or wants to try some of the genetics we've been raising, and we've been doing this for a while, sort of just breeding or at least culling for pigs that are able to eat almost entirely pasture, pigs that are very gentle and safe to be around and stuff. If someone wants to try out some of those pigs, I do sell feeders and larger animals, so I'll be happy to talk with you about that too.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'll be sure to post that in the show description so people can check that out, get those links there. Well, Luke, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me this evening, and I hope you have a good rest of your week.
Thank you for what you're doing for the pastured pork world, and enjoy your pigs.
All right. Take care, man.
Well, I want to thank Luke for coming on the podcast there, and enjoyed talking with him. If you want to find out more about his farm or his setup, obviously there'll be information in the show descriptions. You can check that out. If you have topics or things you want to hear us discuss on the podcast, by all means, please go to redtoolhouse.com, click on the Pastured Pig Podcast link, and you can use that form to send your information. All right. Take care, everybody.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. To learn more about our podcast or to submit topics or recommend guests for future episodes, visit redtoolhouse.com.